Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I thought I'd knock another repeated request out. I get asked this so many times about feed levels and feeding. Well, as you all know, I use the... Let's go. Oh, I can film it in here. That's what I actually use. That's the MSU formula. It came from First Rays in the States. I don't believe that particular company is actually producing fertiliser anymore. I'm not sure. But I've got enough in here to last me donkey's years. I would suspect at least 2, maybe 3 years worth of fertiliser in there at the rate I'm using it. It's a lovely, well-balanced fertiliser, and it's specifically designed for rainwater or reverse osmosis water, which is what I use, or distilled water. In other words, water with nothing in it. So it has to provide everything for the plant's needs. So it's right down at micro level. And this is the important bit here, if you can read it on the video, is this particular brand has got added magnesium and calcium. Now those would normally exist in tap water to one degree or another. The calcium can be a pig with tap water because the level can be so high that it's actually not good for plants. Literally. It's far too much. But when you take water down to its pure state, there's none in there, and plants need some. So this is a nice, well-balanced fertiliser, and so far I'm very pleased with its use. It's actually got more potassium than it has got nitrogen, or has it? Yes, it has. But they are very similar. You know, they're one's 15, one's 13. And the one thing I will need to do, because I grow in the UK, and this is new information from a flipping good grower at both orchid societies. He's a member of both. And he says, yes, they're orchids, but they're still just plants. And in the UK, when we go into the winter, we get ridiculously short days and much lower temperatures. And for the plants to be able to put up with that better, that nitrogen needs to come out as we head towards the autumn. So I will need to get either, well, I will probably have to get some other form of fertiliser just for about a month, not for long, where the nitrogen comes right down and the potassium stays high. And what that effectively does is it hardens off the plant ready for winter, and it does help. And according to that guy, it actually makes a hell of a difference to your depth of colour in your blooms and the number of blooms you get by doing that. I know you can get, like, you know, bloom fertilisers. Well, all they basically are is a lower nitrogen level and a higher potassium level. That's all a bloom fertiliser is. But I don't want to do that specifically for blooms. I just want to harden off the plants a bit, ready to go into winter. As far as what I do is I mix up a stock solution of that stuff. That is so strong it would kill plants. It is incredibly a strong mix, and I keep it in the fridge in the dark and the cold. As advised directly by First Rays, this stuff lasts when mixed up. So you don't have to mix it fresh all the time. And I'm sure half the people that say that are salespeople, because they want you to throw some away and use some more. Then you run out and you go to them and buy some more. Yeah, very clever. Anyway, all I do is I put the amount of water in here that I'm about to use, and I don't put much in there because I like to refresh it more frequently, for reasons we have stated. But I can't not share water in the main because I would just use too much and I can't replace it. So I put the amount of water I'm going to use in there, having sterilised everything prior. And then I put a sploop of that in. That's an imperial sploop. Not having none of this metric sploops. They're no good. Yeah, I am larking around. I put a sploop in. And then we get the old TDS meter and we have a look and see where we're at. Now I'm just about to water things like Restrepias and Masdevallias. They're due today. They come round more frequently. They like to stay moist. They do not need a lot of feed. They need low levels. So TDS reading on there at the moment is about 95. That's fine. Yeah, below 100 is what I was after, and greater than 50. That's how accurate I need to be. It doesn't need to be precise science, it really doesn't. But low levels of feed for some plants medium levels of feed for others that are nice and, growing, but not necessarily really strong growers. And then when you get up to the Vandas, they're high feeders, so they get a higher level of feed, but their water's separate, that's in the bucket. So that's all I do, and it's a repeated process. When plants are actively growing like what they is now, I feed twice and flush once. In another month or so, I'll feed 3 times and flush once. And it's all geared to the frequency. When they're actively growing and the temperatures are warmer and the days are longer, they use up their water and feed quicker. So they need watering more often. That way the flush comes round more often. So I can risk feeding 3 times on the trot and then do a flush of pure water. So that's what I'm up to, starting with this little baby. Yeah. Continuous blooms. This one really is doing well, and its growths come out nice and clean, lovely new leaves. One just about to open there. That one's a little bit crinkly, but it'll straighten up. But yeah, growing on nicely. Anyway, that clears out a multiple set of requests over a period of time. Is how do I feed, when do I feed, what do I feed with? So that's that one done. No, that's not that one done. I've just shown my TDS reading for what I call low-level feeders. That would include Masdevallias for me, Restrepias and Miltoniopsis. So a TDS reading of 70, 80 is fine, and they don't need feeding every time. They need feeding now and again. They're not high feeders, and Miltoniopsis, if you put too much feed in with their roots, they'll burn. They don't like it. They don't need it. So, go to your plant's needs. Other levels, what I would call a medium level feed. So that would be like a general purpose watering around things in pots that are growing okay, but not what I would call seriously vigorous plants. They're just doing their normal thing. What do I mean by that? Demonstration. What I can get at. This little dendrobium, this is Lodigesii. Yes. It is actively growing. It's got new growths pushing out the top. It's got new growths pushing out the side. But it's been recently mounted, and it hasn't got an extensive new root system yet, although it is pushing some out, and the older root system it had was perfectly adequate for that plant. That's a medium level of feed. We've got longer days now. We're well up over 14 hours, heading towards 15, I think, by now. Yeah, so actively growing, but not going mad. So that's a medium level of feed. And I would use a feed level that on my TDS meter read about 150. If it went a bit over 160, 170, I wouldn't cry. And if it was a bit under 130, 140, I'd probably let it go for that particular watering. It's not a precise science. There isn't enough information out there at individual plant level. It doesn't exist. So you just got to use your own judgment. But yeah, TDS reading of an average of around 150 for actively growing plants that are doing okay. And the other level of feed is for what I call high feeders, which at the moment are my Vandas, and if I remember, the Phalaenopsis, but they usually just get what they're flipping given with whatever's in that bowl when I get round to pick those pots up. It's as simple as that. I don't worry about my Phalaenopsis, but strictly speaking, they are high feeders. Right, high levels of feed. Bearing in mind this is a quality fertiliser. It's got reasonably high numbers for its nitrogen and potassium, around the 15 mark. You can get fertilisers that are 20, 20, 20. That's pretty damn strong. I wouldn't use that at full strength on orchids. That's a bit iffy. Too high, too much. They don't need it. Now I'm going to get fogged. Sorry, dog. In joke. Yeah, so a high level of feed, I would go at the TDS reading of around the 200 to 250 mark. Now, the water in the bucket for the Vandas at the moment is around 260, which is about as high as I would want to go. But because when I water the Vandas, and I look round after I've finished, about an inch of water has gone off the bucket, I top it up. Otherwise they don't get in far enough. Bucket's not big enough, you know, the water level has to be up at a certain level. So gradually, as the days go on, that becomes more diluted up to the point where I change the water, which at the moment is about every 10 days, something like that, if I remember, every week. It's usually about every 10 days. Yeah, so that's the levels of feed on a TDS meter. Without a TDS meter, this would be a bit like guesswork, which could mean things not getting anywhere near enough food, or worse, getting far too much and burning roots. Yeah, so to me the TDS meter is important. So that gets that sort of multiple request at many different times, hopefully out of the way. If I've missed anything that you specifically want to know, don't forget this is still geared up to the way I grow my orchids and you know, the fertiliser I'm using. But I'm quite happy to try and answer questions on fertilisers. It's a subject that people worry a lot about, understandably. You know, you overfeed your orchids, you don't do them any good. And you underfeed them, you don't do them any harm, but they might not do quite as well as they could do. That's the only harm you're going to do by underfeeding, quite honestly. It's not damaging. It just means your plant, you know, your canes on your dendrobiums might be a couple of inches shorter than they might have been. Yeah, that's all it is. It's not the end of the world. So that's the feeding and stuff out of the way. Now I need to get on and do it.